Hello everybody, this is Project Alpha. My name is Nikolai Feldman and you're watching live War Diary with Alexey Arestovich. Alexey, hello there. Let's start our stream today with reviewing the map. We have not looked at it for almost a month, I think. I don't know why, but perhaps we were following some silence mode, or perhaps there was not much to look at the moment, but I feel like we should be looking at some things. Nikolai, there was a certain circumstance unfolding on the territory that now you can take a look at, and it shows certain trends and vectors that was too early prematurely talk about until now. Let's start with Toretsk, maybe? No, we need something global, right? We'll go deeper later, but let's start with the overview. So let's look at the northeast of Kharkiv district, and that's good enough. So here Russian achievement is in that they managed to cross the river near Dvorichna and get to the western bank, and now they're creating a base. They're cutting the road in a couple places there, because there's always a fight for the road in the operative art of maneuvering. A good commander would probably be looking at 250 kilometers front depth and width, and tactical probably would be looking at 50 square. So this implies that you need to be faster than your enemy on the roads along the front. There is such a thing as operation lines. These are the lines where you transfer your troops and logistics and ammo and everything along the front. The whole military history is telling us that whoever is maneuvering faster on these operational lines is going to win. And the main task of operative art is to solve the theorem of maneuvering, because on the attackers' operative lines, it's more difficult to maneuver. They're usually longer. And if you're defending, your lines are usually shorter. So it's easier for you to maneuver. However, for this whole war, starting with our counteroffensive, Russians managed to maneuver faster on the external lines than we do on the internal, which technically should not be a thing, yet they're still doing it. Why and how they get there is that they do have a pretty good material capacity on the back, logistics capacity. And if you take a standard staff of Russian brigade, any brigades, the data is available online, or Ukrainian brigade, the main difference you'll see is that Russia has several times more trucks and vehicles than our brigades do. And that's what they're showing. For example, here they also concentrate on cutting the road, because that's the key to maneuvering. The whole Battle of Napoleon near Austerlitz was built on getting his enemies to defend the road. His whole genius was about provoking Russian and Austrian armies to fight for the road when at a certain position where he hit more to the south, knowing that they usually will be fighting for the road. So here they are cutting our road to take away our ability to maneuver, and also to enable themselves to maneuver faster. And the main fight usually goes around which roads are going to be annexed next, and if you can also capture a railroad station, other transport hub, that is usually a bonus. And after that, the main goal is to go south to be able to conduct Izum operation, and then Slavyansk and Kramatorsk operation. See, Izum is down south in the green. So here you can see the usual trend on the front when Russians try to create a cauldron where it's more difficult for us to withdraw from, given that there is a river behind our troops and the bridges have been blown up. And that river is not exactly a fun barrier to cross. I would remind our viewers that Russians stumbled upon the 5-yard wide rivers near Kyiv and failed to cross them under fire. So if you go south on this front, you can still see they continue with the cauldrons and with the pincer motions. That protrusion near Borovaya, that they're trying to attack. They're doing their best, but they have not yet blown through. I would remind our viewers that on the road you can see on the right top corner, is where our troops were holding. And now they're already further. No, not this one, Nikolai, not the one that you colored. The one that's on the red. See where all the red diamonds, that's where our troops were about half a year ago. Not anymore. And we were holding this road, and in parts we were more to the right of this road. It was the same idea to press our troops. And what do you do with the enemy that has their back against the river? You blow the bridges and you isolate them, right? What proper military commanders would do? They would withdraw their troops beyond these barriers, and they would build their defense lines alongside these natural barriers. It's much more difficult to cross the river when our troops would be on the western bank, fortified properly. We could have given a few kilometers on the right bank, but then on the west side we would be holding way better. And then Putin's machine would definitely feel the difficulty of that situation. But unfortunately, our commanders are not the best commanders. They, in my opinion, enter president's office with their pants down, bent over, and they're failing to explain time and time again to the political leadership of the country that their political tasks are destroying the army, killing the people, and is a crime against our nation. Our generals, very brave on the battlefront, unfortunately they're very puny in the face of their political leadership, which is a very uncomfortable thing to realize for me. Every time I pay attention to that. Soldier needs to be brave militarily. General needs to also be brave on the civilian part, and to be able to hold and explain his plan and explain the peculiarities of modern warfare to political leadership who are not experts. Otherwise, you're wasting your troops in a very dumb fashion on the front. While the troops are being wasted, the enemy, however, still cannot solve their main task. See that line between Lysychansk and Slavyansk, and this is a forestry. There's also a Seversky Donetsk river that they need to cross, and their ideation is to take this part of the front and combine Lugansk and Donetsk armies to work together. However, we have our troops very well equipped, very well experienced troops in that part of the front. Near Belogorovka, that more to the south and to the right, that front is holding for about a year and a half, almost 2 years already. Remember when they tried to cross the river and they were conducting the Lysychansk operation? They tried to cross the river near Yampol. That's where we destroyed 2 battalions. It was just a bloodbath, and that was a big scandal for them. One of the brightest defeats of Russian army. Right, that's the task they need to solve. They need to close the flanks, because the moment when 2 neighboring operative strategic groups of command or armies, when they get the joint flank, when they do not have to expect our troops on that flank, they get extra reinforcements just by the nature of changing the shape of the front. Because right now they have to hold about 3 times more troops on that side overall. So when and if they manage to straighten this line, they can choose then the direction of attack that is not dictated by our defense line or our military action, but they will be able to pick parts of the front where they want to wage the offensive, and they can choose several and pick the ones where they would have the most favorable disposition of forces, perhaps create even a dozen-fold advantage over our defenders. But that's yet to come. Until they manage to close their flanks here, that is something that they cannot achieve. And this is one of the key directions of the front. Thank you so much to the brigades holding it, because the moment when it folds, the whole front will be in a much worse shape, and Slavyansk will start feeling the heat much faster. And of course, those who are holding Borovaya, this is another key point there. Now let's go further south, where we have Chasov. So, in the south, the Siversk protrusion is being undercut by Chasov Yar action. Don't zoom too close, we want to see Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, Drushkovka. You can see the triangle of roads here, right? So far, all the military action in the 21st century, just like 2000 years ago, they're conducted alongside the roads and railroads. So their task is to capture this triangle as the forming operation to prepare the offensive. So half of this triangle in order to conduct Kramatorsk and Slavyansk operation. The distance there is fairly small, and it's only because of stubbornness of our troops and the character of the warfare in that part, where they use a lot of FPVs and other tools where we do not have to have too many soldiers on the front. That's why it is holding for so long. But given that Russians managed to create conditions for their infantry that they prefer to die in battle rather than die by not going to battle, they still managed to continue pushing. And we unfortunately do not have a well-established pipeline of new troops and new resources as a society, as a country, so that's why they're slowly chewing through towards Constantinople. And you would want, in a better scenario, they would want to go to Kramatorsk directly by the upper road, but now they have to go around Constantinople and not exactly alongside the road because it's more difficult for them to take certain positions along the road. That's why now they're not taking Pokrovsk in a full frontal assault. They are trying to go in pincer motions. They likely will encircle Constantinople. I don't think they'll take that settlement, and they'll create conditions to isolate that, and then they'll try to go towards Drushkovka, Molotaranyivka, and to the right to the Red Mount and Slavyansk. Now, this third arrow is more to the left. They're probably going more to the right. Towards Liman from the Red Mount, you need to go up, look up a little bit, and point the arrow up north, right. So this would be the connecting element. The road around which they will be working is going to be their connecting element. That's what looks like their ideation is. Now here, don't zoom too close, but you can see Toretsk and New York. Those settlements are already, those townships are already considered taken on this map. Our side does not consider it to be taken yet. We understand that the town has fallen, but the defense area is still standing. This is the main difference. There was like a Donetsk airport when the town has already surrendered, but the airport area was still resisting and was holding. Some of the parts were holding till the hot phase of this war. And our troops standing near Kudyumovka, over here, they're also defending their protrusion with vigor, and Russians don't really have other option but to create another sack, another cauldron here, and try to encircle them with a pincer movement. What we see is that after Avdiivka storm and creating a lot of heat and a lot of casualties while doing that, they're trying to not attack townships. They try to encircle it and press our troops out of it. This is new practice in their warfare, and we understand that's something they learned. So that's why they're following alongside the road, but only to the degree that they're allowed to. Then when they encounter significant resistance, they start maneuvering and looking for weak spots in the front elsewhere. So now we want to move so that we can see Toretsk. And here is another cauldron, Очеретино, New York, and the road from Pokrovsk to Constantinople. This road technically is already taken, and they work in the system of cauldrons on the front, and they continue those same pincer movements. So now we can go to Pokrovsk a bit closer. Let's zoom out. Okay, so now you can see Pokrovsk over here, and all that area to the southeast of Pokrovsk when Avdiivka was taken. This is the achievement of that Russian general, I forgot the last name, who was doing it, right? He was the one who was participating in Mariupol offensive. And remember, they were indicating this motion about a few months ago when they were heading this way. We told that likely they will go in this direction, and they found enough troops to go there and to cut this road in two places. They already probably will cut to the right and to the left of Pokrovsk, so it'll be curious to see what else will they do. From my point of view, after having captured the road, they would want to go to capture Constantinople from the south towards Drushkovka, covering their troops by the natural mount range that you can see near Belitska. Right, this one. So there is a difference where it's difficult to observe them, the radio horizon is different, the troops do not see each other, so if they manage to control this mount, they create a certain difficulty for our troops to use different measures against them, especially radio intel and drone intel. And that's where I think they will try to encircle Constantinople. We don't know the exact political task they have, whether they want to take just Donetsk and Luhansk districts and don't go to Dnipropetrovsk, then they will be just cutting off Pokrovsk and creating a new front alongside Donetsk and Dnipropetrovsk districts. And looking at how they are trying to go north from Pokrovsk, I think they are not going to Dnipropetrovsk district yet, but that may change at any moment. Now let's go south. Remember, Zaluzhny published an article in The Economist that there is a strategic dead end on the front and nobody can move further. And I did come out after the storm of Avdiivka and said, guys, no, there is no dead end, no FPVs, no other technical tools stopped Russians near Avdiivka. And they have similar tools that we do. So they figured a way to solve this block, this roadblock for themselves, which indicates that they do have a certain art of strategic planning, where we lack, unfortunately. So this is another road, and this road is already taken partly. There are about 3 brigades that we have there, and I'm just looking at the size of the map. There should be about 3 brigades, and they're threatened to be encircled there, right near Constantinople. So here they're doing the same task. They're closing their flanks on Constantinople and then continuing their motion along the river, again using the same radio horizon. And I think this river is called Volchia. I may be wrong, but that's what my memory suggests. And then they continue walking along the road further to the northwest, towards the borders of Dnipropetrovsk district. Now let's go more to the south and zoom out a bit. So Velyka Novoselivka, that was taken by the treacherous enemy, that kind of shows where they go after. They go to the northwest. That's where Kurakhova group is going. Yes, this arrow indicates there. But they're mostly going to the borders of the district, solving their political task, and not really attacking much on the Zaporozhye and Dnipropetrovsk districts. This character of their action makes us think that they have political task in front of them to capture Donetsk and Luhansk, and the other districts are secondary task. So far, it doesn't mean that they will not change their doctrine or military task of this operation, but so far it seems their main task is to take Donetsk and Luhansk districts. So this is the task probably of their spring and summer campaign if it continues, and we may need to switch to political part of our review here. And at the bottom, the intensity of fighting is weaker. Yes, the front is more stationary. There's definitely some skirmishes happening along the river and near Orekhov. Near Kherson, the fighting ensues for the islands. We need to say that Kherson got hit many times recently, and there are a lot of civilians who have perished as the result of Russian attacks. We usually pay more attention to the east and to the northeast, but generally Kherson also gets hit quite a bit. Nikopol is also getting attacked, and all townships along the Dnieper River, they get attacked, of course. So, making 2 steps back and looking at the map, we can tell that Russian troops are forming the front for the final capture of Lugansk and Donetsk districts. If they manage to go and create incursions into Donetsk and Dnipropetrovsk and Kharkiv districts and Zaporozhye, those would be secondary tasks. Still, it appears that their main tasks are to capture Donetsk and Lugansk areas. So, on the front, Yes, this is the district border. On the front, they created a bunch of operative strategic cauldrons where they herd our troops to and continue using the same pattern, which our generals have either failed to study or they've been sleeping through that class. And if somebody is missing it, I can refresh their memory that if your enemy creates pincer movements, you need to withdraw from the front and create mobile, compact, effective groups to create counter-attacking motions against those pincers, attack pincers on the sides, and cut them off. If we would be doing that, and it's not secret, it's if you don't sleep on the second part of your tactics class in the first year of the academy, you would have learned it. But unfortunately, it seems like our generals have slept through that, because during 3 years of this war, I am yet to see operative tactical attempts to cut those pincers.
There are some smaller attempts to do that, private, by lower level detachments, but nothing on the operative level. I can only imagine the amount of laughter among the Russian generals when they're taking our townships for the 15th time using the same schema. Before this war, I thought you can train even a bunny to smoke, and you probably can, but I don't think our generals are trainable, unfortunately. Together with the political leadership of the country, who failed to understand that in order to fight this war, you need different strategy and tactics. Otherwise, you're destroying your nation, destroying your people. Tell me, please, Alexey, this week there were some signals about the slowdown of Russian offensive tempos. Have you seen that? Is it true? Oh, no, Nikolai, not at all, absolutely. They actually keep moving in most of the important parts of the front. Perhaps in some of the Kremlin blogger who noticed some part of the front that's very specific where things are slowing down. Overall, if you look at the deep state arrows, you can see that there are a lot of arrows. And just look at the degree of concentration of troops. Where is the concentration weakening? The remaining, actually the 3 months that we just lived through were notable by a couple of things that indicate how difficult the situation is on the front. Civilians might not understand it, but if the enemy managed to cross the river in 2 places that we supposedly guard, that means our defense of that river is horrible. It's screamingly horrible. And especially given that the enemy did that from the lower bank to the higher bank, in normal conditions, this is an unsolvable task, but they did solve it twice. That means that our side is completely inadequate in its defense in this part. And both times there were just smaller boats that Russians sent with 8 or 16 people on. 2 of them, one case, 8 of them crossed, 2 of them died from landmines, the remaining 6 captured 20 and dispelled 20 of ours. And also in Liman, that area is somewhat quiet now, but there were also other attempts to cross the natural barriers there pretty successfully. Under normal conditions, the enemy can try to cross the river, but they likely will fail every time. A good example is Kherson district. Dnieper is granted a wider river, but even jumping from island to island there is difficult for them because they get demolished. And here you have 2 crossings on one river, another crossing on the other. This is a very concerning reality. And it indicates that the level of preparedness of our troops and the level of equipment they have and command they have is very, very critical. And our troops were weakened not so much by Russian pressure, but by idiotic decisions of our military political leadership. This is my diagnosis of this situation. Okay, if we take Toretsk, Alexey, and our withdrawal from that area and Russian troops taking it, it is not taken with pincer motion, right? This one is a bit different. Seems like they've been breaking through and finally got through. Nikolai, every situation on the front is unique. Avdiivka, they also captured via the subterranean tunnel. broke our defense line, and then later they used the pincers and combined effort. In general, their strategy and tactics is driven by the Frunze Academy, what they teach in Moscow. Typical Stalin's Second World War motions. Pincers, and why not to do that? They work. They worked like 30 times during this war. But in Toretsk, you need to review the actual situation. Why did they make this decision? Why did they enter the city? Usually this is being avoided, and it's much more difficult to hold defense against the invading enemy along the fields when you don't have fortifications, when you don't have heights, you don't have landmines that you can easily create and block the towns with. It's more difficult. But look at this way. When they were taking Avdiivka, the most fortified position on our front line, really a lot of concrete, they took it with about 27-28% loss of the advancing group. According to Soviet norms, for such type of an operation, when we take an operation about up to 200 kilometers wide and up to 100 kilometers deep, it should last for about 20 days, and the casualty is supposed to be at about 20% of attacking force. They lost about 27 or 28%. This is not bad, even for Soviet metrics. And of course, they don't have the Soviet capabilities, right? Soviet defense system implied that they would be attacking for the whole depth of this front, for the whole 100 kilometers. Frontline aviation would be cutting off this part of the front from supplies and leadership and communications. And that's how Soviet Union was fighting at the end of the Second World War. That Manchuria operation was probably the best that military thought had concocted in human history. I don't know if our listeners know that there is nothing more brilliant than Manchuria operation, where Soviet Union destroyed Kwantung Army of Japan over there. And it's a masterpiece of military art. Good strategists have written a lot of work about that. The West has a different example. They were mostly fighting on the sea in the Asian Pacific at that time, and it was very difficult from other technical aspects. Of course, a lot of vessels, a lot of locators, a lot of naval methods of fighting warfare. But Soviet school presented the best result in the land operations, and Manchuria was the crown jewel of that. And I wrote about that in my social media. We talked about that in our streams, that it indicates the principal jump in their operative art of Avdiivka capture. Before that, it was still learning curve. Now you can see that they have learned some lessons, and they are using what they learned on different parts of the front now, from Velyka Novoselivka to Kharkiv's district, roughly. So they are researching this experience, they're exchanging this experience, and do you know who carries this experience? The officers of a higher level operative command. The operative art that connects tactics and strategy is one of the most difficult art and the most difficult experience to acquire. People working in these command centers, they are worth their weight in gold. The ones who have experience of deploying between operative and tactical levels. And those who have experience how to conduct warfare on this level, how to provide logistics and supplies on this level. This is very precious experience. At the beginning of this war, everything was very bad for them. We destroyed their initial ideation. Then they, with their blood and stubbornness, learned. And in 2 years, even if we have gathered the dumbest people there, them using the same detachments, they would be able to learn, and they did. And in our case, we have completely artificially failed the operative art. And when I hope I'll have a chance to create a special tribunal, one of the questions I will place in front of our generality, who was resisting continuously to creation of higher level command operating centers, armies and detachments, because the first thing you need to think is to figure out who was resisting that and how dependent were they upon Russian secret services. The scale of that catastrophe is so big that, I'm like the Halon's razor. You don't have to describe with conspiracy theory what can be described with stupidity. This specific case, I strongly suspect, is influenced by Russian money. And this is probably the highest achievement of their special services. Maybe not direct, but somehow the fact that they, I suspect, influenced that situation in our army, that we allow such dumbassery to exist in the generality of Ukrainian command. We need to find who killed Ukrainian army with their decisions, by placing it in a position when it does not have a concentrated operative level of command and disallowing it to connect tactics and strategy, leaving a bloody wound on that level and creating a situation when Russia continues to get more professional in the most complex part, in the key connecting link. And we were put in conditions where we simply cannot acquire this experience. We do not have the capability to, we don't have the body in the military structure to acquire this capability. These army corps that we created is a complete profanity. They were created in a way, they take a brigade and they basically give it several more brigades, and Beletsky, the leader, for example, of one brigade, becomes the corps commander, and more famous brigade commanders become corps commanders. Perhaps we're lucky. Imagine they managed to grow to brigade commander. They're good organizers, right? The top 3 of the brigade commanders, they could probably pull it off. But it's very atypical. First, do not rely on charismatic as a system, right? You got 3 to lead your corps, but for the whole army you need 15. Where else do you take the rest? And unfortunately, they do not have special supply units for these corps. I'll show you on structure what a proper army corps, let's take a Russian army corps, what it looks like. Let's take 22nd. Okay, let's take and compare American and Russian. And you can understand what I'm talking about. American military corps, army corps, they have a mechanized brigade, a paratroopers brigade. They have a significant air force attached to that helicopter air force. They do have a separate detachment for communications that provides communications for the corps. They do have a special intel battalion or armored vehicle detachment that goes ahead, that basically finds where the enemy is and starts the fight. And they also hold the line in front of defense. That's the line where we got bogged down when we were doing our counteroffensive in the south. Russians created pretty good line in front of it. And all these burning tanks and guys blowing up from the 47th Brigade, those are the ones who got into that line. And in the United States, very often it's a separate brigade or sometimes separate command, several battalions of also providing logistics. Depending upon the direction, they can also get engineering forces or pontoon forces to cross water barriers. So the corps commander is thinking about logistics and fighting in about 80 to 20%. 80% of that, his thought, is dedicated to logistics. And the art of war is paradoxical, that it's difficult to organize battle actions on the lower level. This is where the actual fighting is being organized. On a big strategy level, they do solve very different tasks. And in Russia, they're using a combination of 2 detachments under a bigger unit. In Russia, in Soviet Union previously, there was a system where you organize it in 3s, right? In 2, you can only organize the defense of a sector. In 3s, you can organize pretty much a circular defense. So Soviet Union was using the method of 3s. Russia is currently using the method of 2s. What does strategists do? How do you think the generals make their decisions? They stand over the map for a long time, right? And as the movies show, they stand and think for a while how to take that, let's say, Avdiivka. And then he gets an ideation, he draws with a pencil, usually the red pencil, according to the movies, right, the lore, and says, here's how we go. And after that, he supposedly can go and drink cognac with his officers. And the lower level officers actually start then to fulfill, to turn this big arrow into the actual actionable command when they create logistics, when they create details of this operation. That's why the lower you go, the more complex it becomes. On the top level, generalty level, it's a more strategic decision. You basically pick the point where you want to attack and where you want to defend. And the rest, the machine will work for you and make sure that you can do that. Problem is, we don't have these officers who will figure out this logistic element. Because in Russia, they have it, and they've been training them for the last 2 years. And in Ukraine, somebody very cunning and very smart completely failed that element. That's why the highest level of experience where we can continuously acquire that is brigade. In Russia, they have 2 levels above that. And what we're seeing now on the front is not only due to the lack of new recruits or the lack of ammo. For example, Syrskyi finally admitted that Ukraine has 1 artillery shell per 2 Russian shells now, so it's not too bad. But we managed to defend our positions before when we had 1 against 10 shells, right? So that's why I'm curious. Despite of my efforts, despite of Zaluzhny efforts, I wonder, we need to bring out those people, those parts of our military structure, military political structure, who are resistive to creating these levels of command in the Ukrainian army. After I left Ukraine, I posted this question in the public sphere again, and it again was shot down. And I'm very curious to see how they're going to solve the tasks of material and technical support of our groups without having this experience, without having these detachments, because our brigades don't have it. Because one single brigade will not be able, even if elevated to the corps level, will not be able to supply the other brigades. They barely can supply themselves. And then the other question would be, why do not we do divisions? Why do not we do armies, like in Russian army, like in Turkey army, like in the United States army, or in French army? So this is more detailed, but I want to highlight that somebody very smart did everything so that we would lose this war strategically by disavowing us to have this connective tissue between tactical and operative levels, the most difficult art of war that is very difficult to learn and to acquire experience on. So, Alexey, when you're saying that somebody's smart, it implies that we have a select group of people who are probably affecting this. Do we? Sure, we do. This is our Supreme Commander, the head of his office, the head of Central Command. Somewhere in the group of those 5 people, this big thing happened, and for 3 years we do not have the operative level. The head of command was Shaptala, right? Right, Shaptala and Zaluzhny, they were trying to break through with this topic. They were actually bleeding over it to make sure that we get it, and they failed. They were shot down. When there was a big quarrel between the Office of General Command and the President, we'll talk about that later. It's not time yet. There was a very bad episode when they did not communicate. And I was communicating to both sides, listening to one, explaining their position to another, like an arbitrage lawyer. I understood some of this functionality before the war, and it was always driving me bad. The problem there is that most of our military command, they were studying in Lithuania, and they were studying in the Baltic countries. So in those academies, they do not think in the level of armies. Their military command of the country is much smaller. Instead of learning in France or in the United States, we studied where the highest level of thought was brigade, right? And nobody put the question,
oh, just make sure we don't repeat the horrible Soviet Union. Okay, don't repeat Soviet Union, repeat United States. But the irony of that is that even Lithuania created a division out of all the armed forces, looking at us and our experience in this war, and we failed to do that. And despite of all our efforts to institute this level of command, we have failed. And this is one of the biggest reasons that led Ukraine to defeat in this war. Okay, so Alexey, don't tell us yet why did those two levels of command quarrel with each other. But okay, Zaluzhny, Shaptala, you were trying to push this topic. And what? And nothing. Nikolai, I don't know exactly who was doing it behind the scenes and explaining to Supreme Leader that we should not be doing that. I have no idea. I literally do not know. If I knew, I would have said that. I have nothing to be afraid in this regard. I don't know who was stopping it. So it is either Moshevets or Yermak. This is between two people, right? Right, those two people or those who may have entered their office and told them that this is horrible, don't do that. Anything but. Okay, let's dig deeper here. Who could have entered their office? Oh, there were different people visiting their offices, and I think that would be a very interesting circle to look at with this tribunal. I don't want to be just finger pointing here because one needs to do a proper research investigation. Because if you announce that somebody is a traitor, somebody probably influenced that, reality could be different. The person could have been fighting on our side and actually taking the proper position. But yeah, that's why I'm suggesting we need a proper tribunal, proper investigation to figure this out. Alexey, just seems strange to me that if you're a supreme commander, you get people coming to your office, not some random strangers who watched a lot of military wartime material and movies. It's Zaluzhny, it's Shaptala, it's you. Well, I understand Zelensky's logic, right? 3 people who were coming to him with this topic, 2 of them had a very high rating. Where are those 2, right? So against me, they did the Dnieper operation, so-called, and Operation Continuous Trash Talk in Telegram channels. And against Zaluzhny, they conducted a different one. Let's block all of his initiatives. When I come to see him one of the times, he was sitting there, both him and Shaptala, very angry. And I did ask, like, what happened? And they were answering that they gave the list of names for talented people who need to be promoted to lead new detachments, the UAVs, the new brigades, and it is not being signed. We already told them, we already explained on different meetings. They don't sign them out of principle. Okay, let me talk about that episode. I hope Valery will forgive me, but the episode was as follows. In one of the positions of general command in Kyiv, they were stormed by Special Forces Alpha team because somebody said that, somebody reported that they have a striptease club or some brothel operating undercover. So imagine that. Zaluzhny and his team and his guards are sitting and working in the center of Kyiv in their building. Out of the blue, we almost get into a firefight between the armed forces of defense defending Zaluzhny and the special forces of Alpha who were sent there to shut down the reported brothel. Zaluzhny doesn't know who is attacking him, so he brings more troops. Defense brigade with armored equipment and get here. Oh, we need your help. Please rescue us. We're under attack. And it almost got to a firefight between 2 forces. It was either the bravery of Shaptala or Zaluzhny who actually prevented the bloodbath there. And he didn't know. I don't remember if it was Shaptala or Zaluzhny, but one of them went out and talked to the other side, even though they didn't know there could be a real threat targeting the assassination of Zaluzhny. It was fog of war. They did not know the real nature of the threat. And that's what stopped it. They were on the brink. And Maluk, who sent his Alpha Brigade to stop this supposed illegal activity, where did he get this order? From the office of the president. So somebody from there swatted Zaluzhny. And that was happening when there was continuous effort, continuous pressure from Zaluzhny and Shaptala to reform the armed forces of Ukraine. And that's when I was conducting that arbitrage effort, negotiations between two offices, going talking to one, going talking to the other, that this is not an intrigue of the army that we needed. So what was it, Alexey? It was an attempt to suppress them. That SWAT attempt was literally done out of being scared that the army might go for a coup. And that was absolutely unbased, because Zaluzhny was the last person to conduct a coup against the supreme commander. Why would we do that after which this step of a coup, after which we lose all support, because dethroning and toppling the legitimately elected president, at that time he was legitimate still within his term, that would have been a horrible decision. But I guess leadership was very concerned with the growth of popularity and wanted to scare their opponents. Well, they did, right? 2 criminal prosecutions against both, while Zaluzhny and Shaptala are sitting down over the maps, figuring out how can they use what was given, which was only at about 20% of what they asked for counteroffensive. This is when they start getting pulled into interrogations by the investigative committee. And these were the conditions that they worked in, and the officers of the command. They're being swatted, your initiatives are being blocked, there's a criminal prosecution started against you, and stubbornly not a single army initiative was taken. All these things that they're implementing now, the UAV forces, another line of UAV defense, I don't know why, right? Why do we create a secondary structure for UAV? Because even Mariana noted that we already have one structure. Another line that was invented. All these initiatives were suggested even before the war in 21. And then they were brought again over and over again by Zaluzhny in 22. And now when the war is lost, they're trying to now realize some things. And you can see how poorly they realize it. And this is the second big secret of our defeat in this war. All right, so you think this is mostly political reasons? Yes, Nikolai. This is my opinion. Could it be, Alexey, that they used political reasons to mask the actual actions of Russia, attempts to subdue and intervene in the decision-making? Well, right. That's why I'm saying we need to investigate who was coming, who was explaining, who was talking them out of this. And was it that, or was it just a fear of having a division or army corps that you cannot arrest, you cannot suppress in case of a fear that they might do a political coup? So that remains to be discovered after this war. Summing it up, they made a collective farm out of an army and a rusty bicycle out of the whole country that they are now trying to return after having run it down in the ground for some money, and the global US aid scared a lot of adults in the country who had to change their position and applaud to the wild feral attacks on their own citizens. Some others started picking stones and throwing them at the others. And I understand that Stalin scared the shit out of all of us for 100 years forward, but somewhere there's got to be some dignity. If you cannot resist, at least stay mum. Look, Russian intelligence, they are not supportive of Putin. Humanitarian, technical, they're just quiet. They're just mum. In Ukraine, everybody is running to support Bandera more than Bandera was supporting himself. That's why I think we're going to finish with a moral catastrophe. I did not want to say that today, but I will. Today, there are a lot of brave voices about the war final ending being not so good for us. They started to recognize that there's something wrong here, right? Guys, remember that statement. The results of this war will be so horrible, so scary and god-awful that the most pessimistic of you cannot even acknowledge it now or suppose it now. And it's not about territory. Putin may actually give us back Kherson and Zaporozhye districts and just keep Donetsk and Luhansk to himself and Crimea. If we were talking only about territory, look, about a year and a half ago, we were considered to be the night watch for the West against Putin's encroachment. Then we lost all our qualities, and now we're considered to be a gray buffer zone. And as a result of this war, I'm afraid this is what's going to be affirmed on paper. US and Russia will share our dead body as the dead bison killed in the prairie. You already heard that Ukraine will compensate for American aid with rare earth elements and You can translate that as, yeah, we'll cut the meat of this fallen bison. And they will have complete geopolitical understanding with Russia, and they will not even ask our opinion. That's where our genius decisions about pacification, about the lack of operative level of command on the front, about reserves. That's why I think special tribunal is the best option we may still have in the near future after the elections. End of the first hour.